Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta. Guess who's coming to sauna? Hekilunta.
Hello there, Risto. What's going on with you?
Good to see you. Not too much. It's a nice summer day here in Minnesota.
Oh yeah, it's been gorgeous. The 4th of July weekend was gorgeous here in New York City, and there's a lot of people out there. Not maybe a perfect, days for sauna, but because it's been pretty hot and humid. But other than that, it's been great. So it's nice to be here again with you. We have a little bit of a problem with Sam. He's stuck in traffic, so apparently he's coming back home from his 4th of July weekend. But our idea today is to talk. Obviously, we're gonna be talking sauna as we always do, but we try to start or continue a discussion about the categorizations of different styles of saunas, and we've been sort of like talking about this topic for a very long time, but I at least my feeling is that we haven't addressed it properly yet, and probably there won't be an answer even after today, but now that sauna is getting more popularity all over North America, there are all sorts of establishments offering sauna services, whether those are the main drag or so side product. But so how do you, Risto? How do you feel that should there be some categorization? And I'm obviously talking about public saunas here, or do you think that we should just keep going the way things are going, and end customers never really know actually what they're getting into if they don't know about the establishment beforehand? Am I wrong?
Yeah, well, definitely as a customer, I want to know about the establishment beforehand. There's nothing more disappointing than going to use a sauna and then coming away frustrated. And that's happened to me a number of times before.
What do you think? What are the when you? But obviously that has happened to me as well. But what do you think that like normally, where does your frustration come from? What's the what frustrates you?
Ooh, that's a very good question. And it looks like my video's choppy. I don't know what's up tonight. Is the audio okay? Can you hear it fine?
Yes, it's
Okay.
totally fine at this end.
Yeah, and then it looks like we're gonna have maybe some guests joining us. I'll add Frank, and then I'll put the link for anyone watching the show. They can join in this conversation with us as well, um, and help and kind of answer that question of what's kind of the most frustrating thing when you go to use a sauna, or I guess even if you bought a sauna that you didn't get quite what you were looking for. Probably the number one might be just kind of a lack of heat.
Yeah.
And like however that's accomplished, whether it's the air temp or they don't allow you to make steam, because steam can, making low loo can make up for a lower temp quite a bit. So whatever the situation is, if I feel like I can't get really hot, that's pretty disappointing.
Yeah, that's interesting, and this is those are obviously two different things here. It's just the lack of heat is first one, and then second is is there somebody who controls the steam, and those are kind of two different things. And obviously, and we've been touching this a lot at our podcast, but so like Aufguss is a way to control steam uh, by not letting the end users control it. So it's just
Yeah.
controlled by the establishment, and with the theatrics that come with that.
Yeah, I was just thinking over summer, midsummer weekend, sorry. I had the pleasure of going back after 6 years with now my 31-year-old son, and we did a pub and sauna tour. I'll skip the pub tour, that was in London. But the sauna tour started midsummer Friday at my good friend's DIY sauna. I think it's his fourth in his home. And that was great. Following day, we went to my old hotel in Ruoholahti, Helsinki, and I actually had one of these moments, Risto, and Eero, where it was like uh, uh, perkele, one of those perkele moments, where it was like, what's happening here? And there, when you're in the bubble and you're really enjoying sauna, and someone walks in with their street clothes into the shower area and with their shoes and everything, and starts to open the sauna door to look in and things like that, that can kind of burst the bubble. That's kind of one of those moments where, you know, yeah, look at the wall, right there. Every finished sauna has the standard picture. You know, but that's happened quite a number of times, especially at hotel saunas. Very seldom at public saunas. I said so. I had one incident where I was actually the cause. So my first public sauna in Tampere in the early 2000s, my Nokia colleague picked me up at the hotel, and I said, "Wait, I left my sauna kit in the hotel room." And he said, "No, that's okay. You won't need it. You can get anything you want at the public sauna." And we went to Kaupan Oya sauna, a very famous one, where you can even grill your own makara there. And so I walk into the changing area. They give me a towel. I walked into the changing area and took my clothes off, went to the shower, and walked out naked out into the public area. And my colleague, good old buddy, Veli-Pekka Uotanen, he was standing out there laughing, just, found it very funny. And surprisingly, it wasn't the women who were shocked. It was the men. I think they didn't want this rooster parading around that way. So those are my two where I've embarrassed myself, and also where the bubble was broken by someone else.
Now, Frank, you have an interesting history. So you're making this phone call or this live stream from Texas, and you used to work for a Finnish company for a very long time. So that makes you a specialist when it comes to the authentic sauna, I would say, right?
I No, it's like I'm in Texas, but I wasn't born here, so I can't show everybody my Texas passport. Likewise, not actually having been born in Finland or gone to visit grandmother or parents in Finland on a regular basis, I can't really say that I'm a sauna expert. I would say that I'm on a journey, and I've been lucky enough working for this very small Finnish company called Nokia, uh, that for 24 years, that I got to experience through work and then downtime many, many different kinds of sauna. Um, and that gets kind of back to the main point that you asked about types. One of the things I was going to ask you and Risto was, when we think about types, we often think about wood or electric, EOS, but I think it's also important because one of the great things that I experienced was a type that might have a different location than you might think. I spent a lot of time in hotel saunas, but also on the transom of a Viking line going from Stockholm to Helsinki in the evening, coming out of Stockholm, the beautiful archipelago in the summer, and sitting in sauna, looking out in the back and watching that. Also, in one of the first Nokia Kalos in Kalo, Lati, there was a Ranta sauna. And then in one of their other spots, they also had a Ranta sauna, meaning right there on the beach. And so I wonder if we also need to think about location, even though it was a Avanto up in northern Finland, a hole in ice sauna. The fact that it was in that location made it extra special. So, I mean, you almost have to think, because sauna is not just, something you do after sport or something. It's the whole experience and how it fits into your life and your health and things. And so some of these locations One of the spots that my son and I went to was Luolo in Hemni Savi in Helsinki, the public sauna that looks like an overturned rowboat that someone hasn't properly painted correctly. And those locations, I think, are as significant to whether you are doing, traditional sauna, a savu sauna, or whatever.
That's a good point. So, Bill, how are you? What's going on with you, Bill?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm doing well. I'm just sitting here eavesdropping.
Here. So, how do you feel? You've been traveling a lot, particularly here in the U.S. So, should we categorize different types of saunas or not? What's your feeling?
Well, I think to some extent that might be true because, as you know, I spend a lot of time in YMCA's only because they're accessible, and it's more of a utilitarian thing. And of course, we have to put up with the idea that most of the, as everybody seems to acknowledge, North Americans don't know what the heck they're doing. So we're having, you have conflicts, but it's also when I get into the YMCA situations, I also have opportunities to explain things, as it were, and introduce my relationship with you folks, and kind of educate some of the people that aren't quite aware of why they're there. But I think the point about the different venues makes a real valid point. I know that I had a wonderful time up in Finland at the Congress a few years back, experiencing all the different types of saunas. But the environment there, trying to think of the name of not Skansen, it was
Scandic.
yeah, the fish camp. It was a wonderful setting on the river like that with it had a lot to do with the emotion, the mood that you were in, both in the sauna and when you were on the out in the river in a cold plunge. I mean, the state of mind is completely different depending on your venue. I've often looked at these floating saunas and thought that would be idyllic.
That's so true. That's so true. It seems to be an upcoming thing. There's here in upstate New York. There's one opening up a floating sauna very soon, and they take it from the Norwegian. In Oslo there are many floating saunas now. So it has also come from nothing in less than a decade. They have very many saunas there and very many people using them actively. But that's what Frank said. It kind of part of the problem that we are having is that the industry, for obvious reasons, is selling the hot room as the whole sauna, and hence the everything that goes outside the hot room is kind of might be compromised. So that kind of, we're talking about the avantos, the holes in the ice and the whatnot, the nature and whatever is going on. So that's very important, and it's part. I think you're absolutely right. It's part of the categorization, but then there's also like what's happening now is there's like this spa culture is coming back again with a vengeance, and spas do have saunas. But I was just actually reading an article just before this podcast about one of our favorite topics is kind of the sex, the not the sexuality, but kind of the actually the sexuality, the human aspect of when it comes to sauna. So there seems to be more and more now demand for places where some kind of sexuality is not maybe promoted but allowed in a sauna, and it's kind of difficult for a Finnish person to understand. But then again, something like that is happening there as well as we speak, and that's kind of very important. Like to draw a line somewhere to make people understand what kind of sauna experience they are looking forward to.
No, and that's completely understandable. I mean, you're right. You have these infiltrators, these interlopers that come in and they kind of they corrupt the whole concept. You know, that it's somehow it's just because you're naked, that somehow this is supposed to be sexual. And I think this is something that is pretty common in North America anyway. I know I've been in a lot of European situations where nudity was Germany, for instance. Germany, I used to work in Holland, and you would go to the saunas there, and the nudity was just taken for granted. In fact, I always marveled at Germany because you have such a straight-laced society where everything has to be perfect on the outside, but somehow once you pass through the doors of the sauna, the entire community can be naked and nobody seems to notice. It's completely different than what you would encounter in a North American situation like that. The my relatives, I've got relatives in Ukraine, in the Carpathian Mountains. So, and banya is a very common part of their the social climate as well. And you know, people just don't get um, as excited about nudity in the sauna, and they recognize it more along the lines of what you were talking about last, which was that this is a cleansing process. This is the process where we're or not a process. I don't like to use the word process because it is kind of it is a ritual, of course, but the intent is really cleansing of not only the physical body, but I think the mind,
So true.
and reinforcing the social structures as well. I mean, one of the best things about the large YMCA sauna here is that we have it's large enough so that we have large groups of folks that get into conversations and look forward to meeting up with each other. And we actually have a lunch group that started out with about a dozen guys who all met in the sauna, all very diverse backgrounds. But we would get together once a month for lunch just because we knew each other from the sauna.
What sauna was that, Bill?
This is a YMCA, the Dowd YMCA in Charlotte. I live in Charlotte. I live just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. They've got a big YMCA network around here. And in fact, we've got some Ys that have some very, from a utility standpoint, they're very good saunas, very nice little saunas. And I try to, I kind of orbit around some of them. I've also run into kind of accidentally, my mom was ill up in Delaware, near where my sister lives, and I found a YMCA there that had absolutely it was a perfect little sauna situation, which was completely contrary to all the YMCA's I've ever encountered.
Which one was that? You said it was in Delaware?
Yeah, it was one of the ones, and I think it's the Family Something YMCA in Wilmington.
Okay.
It's on, if you know the area, it's on. Trying to think of the name of the road, but anyway, it's right in Well, it's between Wilmington and Hockessin, Delaware, and it's like one of my gripes about the YMCA's is that they do this politically correct thing now because they don't want to have the saunas in isolation because a lot of them have been taken over by people with different lifestyles, shall we say. So they put them in more public areas, and unfortunately, they do the exact wrong thing. They take the hot box and they put it right next to the cold sink. In other words, right in the pool areas, so that they're in a public area. And of course, that literally takes the wind out of the sails of the hot box. The heat. I mean, every time the door is open, that's it. We're done. You're done. So the older YMCA's that still have the isolated saunas, especially in the locker rooms. In the Dowd Y in Charlotte, we've actually got two saunas in the men's locker room. One's about a 70-degree centigrade, and the other one's definitely kept at about 90 degrees centigrade. It's not 100. And, so we have options there. And my only gripe with the public YMCA's is generally cleanliness. I mean, you have to. They do try to maintain them, but I would think the maintenance could be better. But the sauna in Wilmington was definitely a 100-degree sauna. It was in an area that was accessible to both men and women, but it was in an area that was still out of the way. And basically, you had a relaxing mood, and the temperature was definitely usable. And even though they talk about the steam, they don't want the Ys are still reticent about throwing water on the rocks for whatever reason, and there's all kinds of bizarre excuses. Uh, you can kind of get away with it because they left you alone in those situations. Although I found a unique solution, compromise in one of the sauna that I ran into in West Virginia. They actually had a spray bottle. They just had a spray bottle there that you could use to generate the steam.
Hmm.
Well, it was a compromise, granted, but at least it was something.
Yeah. I think, if I ever see a sauna, a picture of a sauna, and it has like 70s era curtains and like 5 or 6 buckets on the benches, then I know it's probably going to be pretty good.
Well, we when we started, so we were working on a sauna ambassador program, and that's partially we are here this evening, and when we started talking about the ambassador program, we started, we thought that, or our first idea was that we're just gonna start looking for good saunas, and then considering what those good saunas, what do they consist of? Why are they considered good saunas? And we've been talking, ad nauseum about bench heights and the heat and can you use water inside the hot room? And those are obviously very important aspects of everything. But at the same time, again, we have now the situation where you have like, there are many saunas that are like, particularly here, I'm in New York. So in the New York area, there's these new spa saunas popping up all over the place. And they're sort of like, kind of the idea with, if I'm not totally mistaken, the idea with many of those is that they are sort of like bars or clubs for the younger generations. So they don't go to a bar anymore, they go to a spa. And it's kind of a, less alcohol, but heat and young people, young beautiful people getting together and whatnot. So and that's understandable, and it's great. But again, you have to categorize these somehow, because that's like that's not necessarily the kind of an experience that if you're just looking for the the cleansing and the sauna and that so you don't want to end up in a bar because you didn't have an idea to go into a bar in the first place. You just wanted to get some sauna, and people singing karaoke and stereos blasting and whatnot. So somehow you need to take these into account when you're talking about saunas. If you want it or not, but you have to take those aspects into the equation somehow.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. When I
or do
when
you?
I hear when I hear about that kind of setup, like that kind of an establishment, I probably instantly think to myself, they're probably not going to want people making a lot of steam. And that if I were to go and use that sauna and make a lot of steam, someone might ask me not to. Now, maybe that's a misconception. You really never know till you actually go and try it out, which is where where ambassadors would come in and be helpful boots on the ground to actually describe what the sauna experience is like at different places.
That could, yeah, I agree. Frank, what do you think? What do you think with your traveling into Finland and places like, have you experienced these new kind of spa places?
Well, in walking my dog around the block, there's a lady on the end, and she sees me with my walking stick, walking around the block, and Joe stops me and said, "Have you tried those infrared heating? That'll help your back quite a bit, and maybe your circulation." And I told her, no, I have a sauna in my backyard. And first she says, "What? What? Oh, a sauna. Yeah. Oh, okay." And I say, that works really great. It's just that here in Texas right now with 90 Fahrenheit, high 30s temperature, I have to wait till the fall to be able to get it. But yeah, I'm in one of the things I think Eero and Risto that you mentioned maybe in previous high bench sessions is that it would be good if there was a map of all the saunas so that you could, if you were traveling somewhere, you could find, what was available. And I think I had to give a moment to think because here in Texas, there aren't that many traditional public saunas. They're mostly, in people's backyards, a lot of people who are ex-Nokia or Nokia people. But I did find that there's one that had emerged. Two. One was a Korean style, and then the other one was something called Spa Castle. And I started looking at that to pass that information maybe on to Risto. And I was really disappointed because they list something as a Finnish dry sauna, but it's an infrared. And I was trying to understand what would happen if I went there with my water bottle and threw water, just ignorantly threw water on the heater. How would that go over there? I'm not sure. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. I don't know if it's cost. Some of these commercial, it's very tough to make a living with the margins on a public sauna, traditional Finnish sauna, at least in North America right now. And maybe cost is driving them because they need different kinds of saunas in a spa or something. But it's a little disappointing because it generates a headwind against the growth of traditional sauna. And I think Americans, aren't really into details. We're a consumer culture. And so we look at what's the cost of having a quote sauna experience, and is it going to be fun for me to invite my friends to go with me? And I think those are some headwinds that we need to take into consideration if we want to build the brand of traditional Finnish sauna. You have to juxtaposition these things like traditional Finnish sauna with the market that you're trying to grow that in. I'll stop there.
I think there's a few maps out there with saunas. I think the trick is to have something that's pretty trustworthy, not just comprehensive. Comprehensive is good. It lets you know where the 1,000 different mobile saunas are. But then the question is, how is that experience once you get there? And then just on the other end, Errol's kind of touched on this a bit. Like there's kind of like the spa side of things. There's a lot of different kind of expressions of sauna. And on the owner side of things, if I think it's a lot of keeping in mind what a Finnish sauna practice is, which I think one of the hallmarks of a good Finnish sauna practice is that it has a lot of elements to it. It's not just you're sauning for your back pain, although you might sauna for your back pain. It's not just that it's the social side, it's also the environmental side, the steam and the heat. So, but it is also still the social side. And then not to mention sauna sausage. So there's all these elements that come together, and I think actually the more of them that you have, the more compelling of an experience that you can offer. So in running a business, I think you tend to want to kind of focus and kind of boil things down to the base elements, and there's some tension there between those two things of having the focus and being pretty simple, but then also making sure that you offer those elements that really make it sing. So I think the business owners that can kind of keep those things in mind of the heat, the steam, the social, the place to rest, the cold plunge, the sausage, like you may not be able to offer all of the elements, but offering as many as you can make a pretty compelling experience. And then Frank, you mentioned location. Sometimes that location can make almost the whole experience, even if the sound is not great. If it's an amazing location, that can be a special a special experience.
Now we've been constantly at NASS. We've constantly been not warned, but people wanna talk to us about like what is kind of the what does NASS actually promote, and there's a lot of discussion about like is the Finnish style sauna, is that kind of the only right way to go? And obviously the industry doesn't agree, and some even think that the Finnish sauna style, even though it's been going on for thousands of years, just one step on the ladder towards something different, and obviously, NASS as a society wants to promote the whole, spectrum of thermal therapy, but it's obviously for a guy like me, the baseline is the Finnish style because that's what I'm used to. But it's also one of the marketer's major mistakes that he or she can do is to think about him or herself when she considers, what should be done. And I, not that I would have anything against music blasting in a hot room per se, but if I have a choice, there's no music. And if I have a choice, I'm gonna control my own steam. So that's what I'm gonna do, and I really do like the company. I don't care who the company is per se, but I like company when I'm saunaing. So, but again, it's just like how do we categorize? Where do we draw the line? And which are not going to the bench heights and the heat and the so forth. So how do we make a difference so that the person who is in the know immediately understands what kind of experience he or she will be looking for?
I think this was one of the reasons that I suggested that Venn diagram that I sent you. It was kind of half in jest, but it's actually pretty reasonable because I think trying to like linearly evaluate all these styles is a losing proposition. You're not going to make a scale of 1 to 10 that's going to include all these variations. So what you have to kind of do is have an indicator that is more subjective rather than objective, and just allow people to figure out where the pendulum lies with respect to whatever the style of that particular thermal environment is, and allow the consumer to decide what they're looking for. Are they looking for the entertainment? Are they looking for the medical benefits? Are they looking for the uh, relaxation and tradition?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be tricky. It's gonna be very tricky. One measure of mine might be like if Arrow says he likes it, I'm gonna like it. So,
Well,
I mean,
and that's true, and that would be what I would refer to as the solid sauna, because it would include all of those things that we're kind of try to define sauna as.
Mm. Yes, obviously, what Frank said about the dry Finnish sauna, which ends up being an infrared cabin.
Oh, yeah,
That's yeah.
and is it possible that we are trying to include all of those things under the umbrella term sauna when in fact we should be using something more generic like what you used a little bit earlier, the thermal therapies or the thermal. I know when I was at the Congress a few years back, there were a lot of medical doctors there, and there was a lot of emphasis on the idea of thermal therapies to include not only the heat but also the cold, obviously. But it also took into account the variations of those thermal therapies, one of which would be a traditional sauna. But they also, just to talk, and I'm not a big fan of the infrareds. In fact, I never gave them much thought until I went to one of the presentations at that Congress that was put on by a cardiologist. And this cardiologist had the empirical evidence about the benefits of specifically infrared sauna for left for uh, enlarged heart. There's a term for, but I can't think of what it. Cardiomyopathy. cardiomyopathy, and it was quite astounding for all the other cardiologists that were there. So I mean, I guess we can't discount it out of hand. But to me, a thermal, I mean, an infrared sauna is not a sauna.
Well, and even what I saw at this spa castle, there isn't just infrared sauna anymore. There's near infrared, far infrared,
Yes.
infrared, and then they get into some sort of color therapy along with it, and I mean aromatherapy.
Yeah.
So I mean, in using your Venn diagram analog, there or analogy, there is in that particular circle even a whole bunch of different things.
Absolutely.
Uh, sorry.
No, absolutely. I agree.
On the area of health, um, I'm reminded I was a pre-med student in my undergraduate career, and I was debating, do I go to medical school or do I go to DO, Doctor of Osteopathy, which is more a holistic medicine. And I think you can also think the same way about traditional sauna. Are you approaching it in a holistic way? And Risto mentioned this. There's not just the hot room. There's also the cool down and the plunge, maybe cool plunge or cold plunge. Are you thinking about this holistically in that spectrum? Or are you thinking about one of the great things that I found in the use of my backyard sauna? When I was employed and working before I retired, I would have some end of the week problems that gave me headaches all through the week. And somehow Lolu was sitting there and she would ask me, to say what was my problem. And I'd, speaking my mind to her. And she was like the oracle in Delphi. She would, answer in a question. And by the end of my 3 rounds in the sauna, I would have an approach I could take on Monday, or maybe I would have an idea for a patent, suggestion. So, I mean, there's also this aspect of sauna, even if you're going solo, there is an environment that provokes different aspects holistically, mental, physical, fellowship. And, we could even talk about the spiritual, as a part if we go back to the First Nation people and their equivalent.
And I'm in complete agreement. I mean, I try to go 3 to 4, 5 times a week, partially because of the arthritis in my left knee, which is, of course, a sign of old age, but it's also to make friends. It's also to meditate. That's basically a form of meditation. Especially if you're there all by yourself, you can sit there and it's a timeout. So I agree. There are multiple reasons, even for an individual to. So that's why I think trying to categorize this on a linear scale, or trying to categorize it under one umbrella term, may be a losing proposition because it is so multidimensional.
That's so true. One aspect is to maybe think about. Let's go back to the map, which is, I think, one of the first things that the ambassadors are chartered to provide input on, is who is the readership and what do they actually want. So in 2 weeks before I went with my son for midsummer sauna tour, I was like, midsummer weekend, is any public sauna going to be open? And that was a big question. It's like, okay, I bought the tickets. I'm committed to the hotel. I don't know if we're going to have many saunas to tour other than hotel sauna. And it took a lot of Google Gemini AI to help me find which ones are going to be open. And not only that, we had a dinner reservation in Tampere at the Tampere restaurant at 4:30 so we could make our 7 o'clock train back to Helsinki. And so I had to find one that was going to be open, that after an hour and a half or so in sauna, we'd be able to make our restaurant reservation and meet my friends there in Tampere. So, I mean, that was a struggle, but if I had some sort of map, the same way I could use flights.google to find particular flights, put in criteria and let the search engine crank away, that would be very nice. And maybe that's something Risto and Eero, we should think about is that one of the benefits of the Google search engine is that it's an engine, and there's something called Google Dorking where you basically crap your search criteria, like file colon PDF, and it actually draws the searches. And if our back end for the sauna map actually was similar to that, then people could use the graphical user interface for the sauna map, or they could actually just hit it with search commands and get the detailed metadata that hopefully is embedded beyond what you might see in the graphical user interface, but is there also. And maybe that approaches, Bill, some of the things where you said, okay, we pack a whole lot of information in the way we review a sauna, but the normal interface through a map like GUI interface only surfaces the high level things. But if you want more information, you could maybe have additional search mechanisms to find it.
Yeah, you give them a first pass superficially to locate the facilities, and then if they want to choose to dig deeper, then you can have evaluation criteria.
The kind of the if we don't talk about public saunas only, we talk about the whole sauna scene in North America. I guess I mentioned that last live stream that we did that I was lucky to meet Dr. Jari Laukkanen, who's the person behind that study that came out 2015 about health benefits of sauna, and it was welcomed by the sauna industry all over the world, and it's partially what happened was that people are mostly like at least back, I don't know what the situation is today, but back in the day about 90% of the sauna searches had something to do with health benefits. So people thought, or people felt that the health benefits are the reason why you should sauna bathe in the first place, and it's kind of a very health conscious driven industry, and but it doesn't make this task at all easier, because it's basically it's a hot box industry. It's the heat, coming back to the word heat or thermal therapy, and obviously you throw that cold plunge there, so you have the contrast heat therapy at that point. But it, even though so you would think that it comes with that enjoyment, but it necessarily does not come with the enjoyment. So it's there should be more than the health benefits to understand what the sauna actually can give you, what it consists of, and this is kind of the misunderstanding that we are trying to fight here as well.
So I'd be curious to know what kind of categories come into your mind, Eero, when you think about sauna, because I know there's a number of different ways that we could categorize sauna. What do you think is some of the more helpful ways to categorize sauna?
I think what Bill said before could work as some kind of a starting phase. It's just like, we should be looking at what people are looking at. It's if that there's some people are looking only the health benefit parts. Some people are looking for the karaoke and the programmed experience. Uh, some people are old schoolers like I am. I'm just looking for that sauna with the everything that goes with it. I'm it's not a it's not a secret that I'm traveling the country and giving lectures, and there I am explaining how fire, earth, air, and water are the elements that you need for your sauna bathing experience. So I'm looking for all those four in order to fulfill my urge.
To me, that sounds kind of like, because you could categorize it by structure, or you could categorize it by the practice of what you do. And then kind of the last way, which it sounded like mostly yours kind of fit into this, was you could categorize it by the motivation. Like, what is the person why are they seeking out a sauna? So you're right, you mentioned health, and even under health, I think there's subcategories. Someone could just be looking to detox or try and get the cardiovascular benefits that they read about in Dr. Laukonen's study. Or they could be trying to do recovery, for maybe they're like a pretty active athlete and they're trying to improve their recovery. So even each of those different camps are going to select a different thing for sauna or be looking for a different thing from sauna, or maybe not even sauna, maybe infrared. They don't care, just any thermal therapy. Yeah, it seems like there's maybe, if I just had to guess without just like sitting down and kind of writing it out, maybe around 10 different primary motivations that people seek out saunas in North America.
The amusing thing often is that they think they know why they're doing it, but they don't really understand what the benefit is, what their benefit is. It brings to mind the folks the athletic folks you run into in the YMCA. They think that after a workout or before a workout, they're supposed to go experience the sauna, and in some cases, that may only be for 10 seconds. I mean, they come in for 30 seconds at a time. Or in some instances, I've seen people that have come in with all sorts of weightlifting equipment and actually spend the next half hour trying to do their weight exercises in the sauna. While everybody else is they're sitting there trying to enjoy the environment. So, I mean, there are some people that will claim that they know why they're pursuing sauna, but they don't really understand it in the first place.
Or at least they don't understand it in the same way that like Finns would understand it. They,
Yeah, but
you know,
I'm talking about, for instance, if someone is pursuing the health benefits. If it's not the health benefits, I mean, there's a whole range of conceptions about that as well that in some cases don't make any sense.
yeah, that's true. Yep.
It's very common now that at some places you go to, you're sort of, you being like escorted from the hot room to the cold plunge, and people like clock you during the process, and there's basically nothing wrong with that per se, that might come from the German tradition partially, maybe. But it doesn't make any sense to me that somebody's clocking you how many seconds you are in the cold plunge.
I've seen people with stop leeches. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's
Okay. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. But, uh, I wear a finished Polar watch, and it says it's not, doesn't work, or I violate the warranty because I use it in the sauna. But it is very good for me because I kind of lose track of time. I blame it on Lolu, but I lose track of time. But having this watch, I keep my pace of time in and time out. And so, I mean, I use timing, but I wouldn't say how long can I stay in a cold plunge or in a Avanto hole in ice sauna. How am I just in and out? Well, I mean, it depends. If it's under 11 Celsius, yeah, probably I'm in and out, but in uh in the Kauka Yarven, where we were last Saturday, um it was 16 Celsius, and so I could tread around in the water a little bit and everything. But um yeah, timing has I respect the German culture. I mean, so I like the timing, but it also has a place, especially if you're still on a sauna journey and you're trying to improve yourself. I think it helps quite a bit. Yeah. I know my son, he was complaining because we were looking at the kcals we were burning and the heart rate, and his sauna at his apartment, which he tries to manipulate as a finished sauna. So he's had good training, but it's been broken for, I think, the last 3 months for some reason. And so he was complaining that he was out of shape. because he wasn't burning, his heart rate was real high and he wasn't burning the same amount of kcal as I was burning.
Did you, Frank, see that there's a comment for you? Oh, there it is.
I did. My web user interface on Windows 11 for this service is not that great, but I did see that Third Pig said he was a retired DO and has quite a number of decades, 4 decades of experience, and currently does 3 to 4 times a week sauna. I guess you must not live in the heat of North Texas. And he's been recommending to friends and patients, for some time to do sauna. And yeah, I can understand. My kids are not, none of them are in the medical profession, but they certainly encourage me also to keep up for my own health.
I'm personally, I'm leaving for Finland on Tuesday, and my wife inherited.
Mainly, maybe it depends on thin air ground strike.
That is true. That is very true. That is very. Thanks for reminding me.
Well, we had to dodge it. We were just lucky.
Yeah. Same with my son. But anyway, so yeah, so I'm leaving for, hopefully, maybe I'm leaving for Finland on Tuesday, and we're gonna go to the mid part of Finland, and there will be almost daily, I believe, some sauna for me in that, and it's suppose that it's gonna be also beautiful. You never know. Finland is so high up north that you never know what kind of weather you will be getting, but it's supposed it's going to be beautiful.
Finland doesn't have bad weather at all, and I know you know this. It's just the people don't know how to dress.
That's also true, and hence the popularity of sauna, because it doesn't matter what kind of, it's raining cats and dogs, and your sauna is just perfect.
And I love the white night.
Yeah, those are there as well.
It's great.
So we've been talking almost an hour here. So yeah, so the work continues. How do we make this sauna thing not only a regime for the health conscious? How do we promote the sauna, and how do we categorize the sauna experience so that people will get an understanding what they will be getting when they go to an establishment? It's just like, I always say the same things, but it's pretty much still, and some people are not gonna like what I'm saying, but you want you want to have a good sauna experience in New York City, go to a banya. That's where the good sauna is.
That's what I like in Texas too, even in the summertime.
So maybe I'm bringing my tech background, but there's a term BCP, best common practices. And I take it religious spectrum. Whether you're whatever your denomination, there's like this best common practice, and based on your family and opportunity, you fall somewhere on the spectrum around it. But I think with the expertise that you have in NASS and the people who I think are, feel an affinity to the NASS, I think that if you had a best common practice that was full of dogma, here is the best common practice for a bunch of these categories of sauna, and people can be flexible. I mean, it's a journey. You start off at one part and on one particular ladder, one particular category of a sauna, and hopefully you get to experience the whole spectrum and you can find what you like there. But without having some sort of bishops of sauna being able to give me a book that is the best common practice with these various categories, then I'm flying in the dark. I think I need that kind of guidance.
The other thing I think, Frank, that you touched on was the target audience. I think we've been making this assumption that there's this monolithic North American that doesn't know what's going on, when in fact there are a whole bunch of factions of North Americans that probably don't know what's going on. And you have to kind of approach it from the viewpoint of the consumer. what is their intent in consuming what they perceive to be the sauna culture from their standpoint.
Right.
You know, rather than you're trying to categorize the various types of sauna and assume one sort of consumer, that we have to take the opposite viewpoint and figure out which what are the components of the target audience, and where we should direct their attention, whether it be a traditional sauna or the carnival saunas.
So there will be a lot of denominations using that, terminology, but I am looking and hope that the NAS efforts will start with kind of the mother lode, which is the traditional Finnish sauna, and give us kind of this dogma in various categories, and then explain, where there are variants that have popped up that seem to make sense. And yes, it does deviate, but there could be reasons for that, But if you want to know, how to construct a sauna, and you want it to follow a traditional Finnish sauna, then, there will be things about ventilation and seat versus uh, uh, kiosk height and things like that. And people want to know it. And I mean, when I needed to clean my sauna, it's like, what do I do? And I saw on YouTube this guy who took a bucket of baking soda and put it in a pot and cleaned his sauna. And I burned the wood in my sauna with that much baking soda because I didn't have the guidance on how to clean, right? And so I think having an orthodox definition of best common practice will help people, and giving some guidance, here are traditional variants of that. But, having that source of information, I think, is important to capture before these current sauna veterans, are in the sauna in the sky. We've got to capture it.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see, I just, as you talk about this, like I picture, a picture comes to mind of like a NASS video that's maybe like an animated explainer video that connects with people wherever they're at with their understanding of sauna. Where you could talk about the different motivations or the different expressions of things that fall under that name, even if it's not actually a sauna, even if it's infrared, and just talk about that, like someone, a lot of people buy an infrared, and here's kind of the reasons why they do that and how it's used. Just talk through that. You don't have to say anything negative about it. Just describe that. And then you can describe some of these different expressions in the thermal therapy world. I don't love that term because I think it just ends up with a diluted kind of lowest common denominator. That's, if I see a website of a company that says thermal therapy, I'm probably going to avoid that sauna just because it's going to be.
It takes the spiritual element out, and that's only one of the elements that are missing in that. But again, that's why my affinity is with the traditional Finnish sauna and understanding that further,
Well,
and the history of it. But
yeah, and that's where at the video, I would kind of end with the Finnish one and talk about kind of what is that Finnish mindset. You're a sauna student. I'm a sauna student. I didn't grow up with it. And it's it's the process of trying to understand what is that Finnish mindset of sauna. So a video like that, if it could compare and contrast these different mindsets and expressions, and then at the end say, hey, this is like Eero is a Finn. Here's how he thinks of sauna, and talk about those different elements. Then someone, no matter where they're at in their journey, they could say, oh, like I'm in this camp, but oh, that's the Finnish. Oh, okay, I can see how it's similar and different between those two. Because I think people just even seeing the term Finnish or traditional, it's really only a couple words, and I think there's really a benefit in NASS unpacking what that means. Otherwise, you could just see that marketing and you buy something and you don't know that there's so many other things that are part of that practice than just the product you got that has that name. So I think getting into those details would be helpful to people, and we can't oversimplify it, or you just end up with back at the hot box thing again.
That's a very good way to put it. Very good. So let's wrap up. This has been a very productive discussion, I feel, and thank you, Frank. Thank you, Bill, for showing up today. We definitely have to do that video. We should start on it right now. That's a good point. But anyway, on my behalf, thanks. I will be traveling for the next couple of weeks, and then I will find myself after a couple of weeks, I will be in Duluth, Minnesota at the FinFest. So I'm going to give a couple of talks and then a panel discussion there. But anyway, Risto, your final thoughts.
Well, Frank and Bill, it was a pleasure meeting you both. And I'm gonna have to go back through and listen to, you mentioned a few saunas, so I got to take notes from both of you guys. Yeah. And then if ever I'm in your area, I'll have to track you down. So thank you again for joining us.
Hey, thanks for the invitation. Bill must have put a face and a name together.
Yeah, and Frank, I'm going to be down at Dallas next month for at least 2 days, and presuming it's not a Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to be in the Banya.
That's right, the Russian sauna in Carrollton.
The Carrollton, yeah. I go there quite regularly, and you know, kind of, well, whenever I'm in town. I don't get into town all that much, but sometimes I get in there for weeks at a time. I work for American, so I have temporary assignments down there occasionally.
Yeah, we're all going to be in touch soon. So, but thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Good.
Good night.